There he is. Nathaniel, how are you?
I'm very good, Ariel. How are you?
I'm doing great. You're right now in Brad Pickett's house, correct?
Yes, I'm in Brad Pickett's man cave now, as
Yes.
I don't actually really know how to use Skype, so he set it up for me.
It's amazing. We're teaching everyone how to use Skype today, and I recognize those toys back there because Brad has joined us from that very room. By the way, I have to ask: have you ever had a shoey before?
I have no idea what a shoey is.
Well, our previous guest, Tai Tuivasa, says that he likes to drink out of another person's shoe, put alcohol in it, and have people spit in the shoe and then drink the whole thing. Can you believe this? That people actually do this?
Yeah, we don't do that over here. That's for sure.
It sounds like the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, and I'm happy to hear in England they don't do that sort of thing. So, you're back in London on Saturday. You're clearly the hometown guy. The whole place is packed. It's an amazing scene. It's at that venue where it's kind of raised up, so it's like you guys are on the stage. It's just a great atmosphere, and it goes down like that 50-second KO. And what was so great about this KO, you knew it was over before Luka even fell to the mat. I know we're pretty much 48 hours removed, but was that the greatest night of your career thus far? How it all came together and there was no controversy or dramatic like it was just you going in there, doing your job, finishing your opponent in less than a minute.
Yeah, it was an amazing feeling. I was 100% confident that that's how it was going to go. I've said in a lot of interviews that how the last fight went, it was very back and forth. The only intentions I had on Saturday was going in there and putting him out in dominant fashion. And, to get the knockout like that and for it to already go viral, it's just, it's another dream come true.
The experience against Josh Reed, and we're taking a look at the finish right now. I love the way you react even before Luka falls to the mat. But the experience back in September, how it seemed like you were on the verge of losing the belt, on the verge of getting finished, and then coming back, of course. How has that changed you as a fighter, if at all?
I think after the Josh Reed fight, going into that fight, I was slightly overtrained, and I had a very busy year. So, since that fight, I got to, take a little step back and regain myself. And, it was a little bit of a slight wake-up call, that, these 4-ounce gloves, you can't afford to get caught. And, so my training, I've made sure that, in the training that I'm doing now, I'm definitely not getting caught, and, Saturday that showed that, the game plan went perfectly exactly how we run it. And, I wasn't in there to mess about this time. I was going in there to get the job done. And as they say, we don't get paid for overtime. So that's what I'm doing from now on.
How often do people talk to you about that first round?
Oh, you wouldn't believe it. So many people. I think I've repeated the amount of times I've spoke about that fight. And, it's deja vu every time someone speaks about it.
Are you sick of talking about it?
I am to the average random person. A lot of people just say to me, "Oh, you're the guy in the yellow shorts, right?" So, still talking to the random person, yeah, I'm sick and tired of it. But for you, Ariel, I can talk about it. It's not a problem for sure.
Well, I'm just wondering if you're especially happy about Saturday because now there's a new thing to talk about, right? And it's just as viral. It's just as spectacular to watch. Is that a nice byproduct of the way things went down for you on Saturday?
Yeah, as my coach Brad Pickett said, he said that a win for me on Saturday was so important. So to turn around and get another viral knockout in such a dominant way, is amazing. And it's a great feeling. And this time, I'm not hearing anyone critique it and say, the ref should have stopped it or this should have happened. I got a dominant win, and without a doubt, that it couldn't have gone better.
When did you first meet Brad?
I first met Brad when he didn't even know who I was, and I knew who he was about 6 years ago. I just give him a little, well, hey, Brad, and he just smiled and looked at me like a crazy fan. But it was actually about 4 years ago when I met him. We was doing some sparring, and a teammate of mine invited Brad down, and I got to know him. And fortunate enough for me, he moved 5 minutes around the house from mine, and he just said to me, do you want to come and train with me at Team Titan? Get in the car and I'll drive you down there. So about 4 years ago, that was then, and the rest is history, and I honestly feel like I've known Brad all my life.
Is like initially for someone who's, talking to Brad Pickett is a legend of UK MMA. Initially, you just reach out to him, but now he becomes a mentor and a coach and a friend. How long does it take to sort of get over the fact that, wow, this is Brad Pickett, and then he just becomes like a guy in your life now? But initially, I would imagine it was somewhat surreal that you're being, groomed by him, right?
It was crazy, where we travel to the gym, it's about an hour and a half. So, I'm
oh,
there. He's there trying to make me jump in the ground.
Oh, there he is.
He's trying to steal the limelight, isn't he?
Yes, that's right.
Crazy. It was crazy. I see him on TV, and now I'm sitting in the car with him, after listening to music and just talking a load of crap. It was quite a surreal experience. But now, it feels weird thinking who Brad actually is, and I always forget how big he actually is. Because to me, he's family.
I noticed at the beginning of the fight, and I believe we have the clip. Right before you walk into the cage, he likes to slap you, and I've seen this most notably in Japan. I know Antonio Inoki does this sort of thing. When did that start between you two?
Well, it's actually something I've always done for my semi-pro days with my dad. I always like to get a good slap before I go in to wake me up, and any nerves and jitters that you've got, slap it out of you. And it was actually 3 fights ago, my dad turned around and said, look, I don't want to be in your corner anymore. He said, I want your other coaches to do that because he feels they offer more. And, someone had to take the role. So I asked Brad.
Wow.
And, I think he enjoys it.
What was it like for you when your dad told you that, when he said that he wanted you to go off on your own and not be in your corner anymore?
It was slightly upsetting for me. Because he's been there the whole time, and he's still my coach now. He still does pads and striking with me. And I would say that it's my dad who I've learned most of my stuff from. But I could see where he was coming from. He doesn't do as much as we used to with me now. So a lot of the time I'm spending time with other guys, and I could only have 3 cornermen. So for him, he said, look, I want to take a step back and let your jiu-jitsu coach, your other head coach, etc., take over. So for me, it was slightly upsetting, but he was adamant that that's what was best for me. So for my dad to do that, I respected his decision. And, he happily took a step back and let the other guys take over. And it just meant that someone had to take over the slap. And as I say, I think Brad really enjoys that at the moment. And, any times I annoy him, I think he just thinks when it comes fight day, I'm giving you an extra slap for that.
Was your father in attendance on Saturday? Was he there watching?
Yes, he was there, and he actually cornered me for this one because unfortunately one of my other women couldn't make it. So, it was nice to have him in the corner and celebrate the victory. But, regardless, I've always made sure that since he's taken that step back, he always walks out with us, so he is still technically there and he still gets to celebrate with me in the cage. He just unfortunately can't sit in the actual cornerman section where the other 3 cornermen would be sitting.
What is it like for a Londoner to go out there in front of his own people and hear them chant for you like that and have that reaction for you, and then to walk out with the flag and then deliver for them, and then the reaction afterwards and the UFC chants? I mean, very few people on this planet get to experience something like that. What is that like for you?
It's amazing. It's a lot of them support that I have in there. They're close friends and family. We're a very tight community, and they've got my back and I've got theirs, and the support that I've received from them is amazing. I honestly couldn't. I have to pinch myself when I look back and see the UFC chants at the end of that fight. That was probably the best experience in my career so far to date with these.
Yeah. So what was interesting about it was right after the fight, you went to sort of the side setup. Dan Hardy was there, Graham Boylan was there, and it's somewhat unique to see Graham, who's the CEO of the company, the head promoter, say that he thinks that you should be in the UFC. So here's a guy who is obviously doing good business with you on the roster. And I know he's a manager as well, but I thought that was very interesting. Do you agree that it's time for you to go to the UFC? Do you feel like you're ready for the UFC?
Ariel, I think I've been ready for the UFC for the last 2.5 years, but it's actually now that I've got I can now say, I deserve it with how my record's gone, how my wins have been. I think I'm more than ready to now. And I think right now I'm ready to go in there at the moment with the top 10, and for Graham to back that, to me, it makes sense. He knows it's the truth. And I think a lot of the people know it's the truth. But, Cage Warriors is a great promotion for me to be with. And I honestly think that they do have fighters' best interests, So for Graham to say that he thinks I'm ready for the UFC, I think that speaks for itself.
One thing that I really appreciate from you is, because I've read you, you've said this before, you're not going to beg. You don't like to see guys beg. You don't want to go out there on Twitter and do the whole, like, get me into the UFC. There is something, and I understand why people do it, but it's a little bit off-putting to see, grown men and women beg for an opportunity. Usually an opportunity comes when you deserve it and you want them to recognize you and sign you. Why do you feel so strongly against maybe some of the methods that we've seen in the past from other fighters?
I think it's a confidence thing. I believe that I'm ready for the UFC and I'll be in the UFC. So I don't need to beg, I know they'll come to me, and if they don't, it's their loss at the moment, Whereas I think a lot of fighters, they're begging to get into the UFC because that's their way in. But for me, my fighting does the talking, and I know that if the UFC doesn't come, then I'll knock another guy out until they eventually do come. So, the need to beg it, I'll never beg any man for anything.
That being said, will you be disappointed if your next fight isn't in the UFC?
I won't be disappointed because I know I'm eventually going to get there. For me, what Cage Warriors do very well is they promote me very well. I'm a big fish in a little pond. So when I get to the UFC, I know that straight away, I'm not going to be a big fish, and, I won't necessarily get the best promotion from the start. So for me, every fight that I have outside the UFC just means that I'm going to get even bigger and I'm going to grow even more. So that when I do get to the UFC, I'm going to be an even bigger name, and in the long run, it will be better for me. So, I'm confident that I'll have as many fights as I need to get there, and eventually, when I do, I'll be an even bigger star.
I was wondering at the beginning of the show, your nickname is the Prospect. If you become UFC champion, you can't be known as the Prospect anymore, right? I mean, that nickname has an expiration date.
Eventually, I said when I become UFC champion, I'll have to change it. But then even Brad said, but then you can become pound for pound #1. Then there's always that next stage. So,
okay.
At the moment, I've branded myself very well with it, and I like it. So I think it might have to stick. But you're right, eventually I may have to come up with another nickname. But, definitely for now, it's sticking with me.
Who gave you that nickname?
It was my dad that gave it to me, and it was actually before I even had my first semi-pro fight.
Wow. So why did he give it to you?
He knew I was the Prospect. That's literally it. He knew.
That's amazing. He knew that you were going to turn it. He was okay. He pushed you to do this.
Yeah, my dad's been in martial arts for all his life, and it was him that actually got me into it. I said to my dad, look, I really don't want to do building for a living. Since I left school, I went straight into carpentry, and, I didn't enjoy it. And for me, it's always been a dream to do a sport. And there's not many sports out there that you can start at the age of 16 and pursue a career. And my dad was currently doing jiu-jitsu with Jimmy Manuwa and a few other MMA guys. And at the time I was a big UFC fan, and I went along, and I was like a duck to water. And so because of my dad, he gave me the money to pay the monthly memberships, and he made it affordable for me, to achieve my dream. So for that, I'm forever grateful for him.
By the way, right after your fight, at the beginning of the post-fight interview, you gave a shout out to someone who passed away, but I couldn't really understand what you were saying. Could you clear that up?
Yeah, it's a lovely lady that was taken from us the other day, Marina Papas. She's my head coach's wife. She was battling with cancer and unfortunately passed away last week, which is why he couldn't corner me.
Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of, pay my respects to her. He was in the crowd and he did come in the cage after the fight, and it was quite emotional. But, I got that win for her, and I honestly think that she was looking down on us, and she was with us that night.
Wow. Well, I'm very sorry to hear about that for you and your coach as well. I know there's a push to see you fight Jack Shore, and I know he fought on the card. What did you make of his performance? Have you seen it?
I didn't. Backstage, we did have a TV on, and I saw bits of the fight as I was warming up myself. If I'm honest, Ariel, he's not on my level. I respect him, and I actually really like him, and I like his dad as well. Richard, I shook their hands and stuff, and I met them on Saturday. But, if I'm honest, Ariel, they're not on my level. I honestly think that the only guys that are on my level are the top guys in the UFC. So, for me, I don't really take much notice of it as far as getting matched with him. Mm-hmm. But, I always say that I don't turn anyone down. And if that's who Cage Warriors would like to set me up with to fight, let's bring it on. Let's get it going.
Let's say you're signed to the UFC and you have the pick of the litter for your debut and you think that you're a top 10 guy. What's the dream scenario for your first fight in the UFC?
Well, before we started this interview, Brad actually gave me a list. Do you want to see the list?
I'd love to see the list. Wow, look at that. Marlon Vera, Uriah Faber, Yuri Alcantara, Thomas Almeida, Renan Barão, Eddie Wineland, Enrique Briones. So are we moving backwards here? Wait, that's Brad's hit list. Oh, I was like, these guys all have something in common. Yes.
Yeah. He wants a bit of revenge. So, he's giving me that list and, I'll do what coach says. But no, if I'm honest, I would take anyone they offered me in the UFC. I looked today at the top rankings, and I don't think it's until you get to number 18, they're all American fighters and Brazilian fighters. Where's the English guys? I believe I'm ranked number 1 in England now. So, since Brad has retired, I feel like he's passed that torch on to me, and someone needs to go there and tear the division up. And I honestly believe that's me. We've got a new wave of guys coming from England now. We've got Darren Till taking over the welterweight division, and I believe I'm the guy to do it at bantamweight. So, as I say, I'm just waiting for my opportunity. But when it comes, top 10, top 5, or whoever, whoever the UFC would want to give me, I would take them on, and I'm confident that I would finish them.
I love this idea of Brad turning you into this sort of cyborg to go after all the guys who beat him. That's a great story. Like he's going to program you as his own personal robot. I love that. By the way, UFC going back to England in May, is that a dream scenario for you to fight in Liverpool? I know that it's not London, but to fight in your home country in your UFC debut, would you like that, or is that too soon?
That would be amazing. I feel like that's destiny because, with the fight on Saturday, I came out uninjured, unscratched, If that's not a sign that I can fight in 9 weeks' time, I don't know what is. I'd have a week off this week. I'll binge, have some cake, enjoy life for a week. Then I've got 8 weeks to prepare. I'm in shape now. It would be the perfect scenario right before summer. Make my UFC debut. That would be a dream come true. And in England, I couldn't ask for a better scenario.
Yeah, the scene right now, as far as the guys that we talked about in Liverpool, young fighters like you in London, it's just amazing what's going on in European and specifically UK MMA. Graham, by the way, tweeted earlier today that he was asking the people which is the bigger fight, you versus Jack Shore or you versus Paddy Pimblett at 145. He said all have the capabilities of being 2-division champions. Either one would be the biggest fight in Europe right now. Do you have a preference, and do you agree with him as far as it being the biggest fight in Europe?
I don't have a preference. I know I've always said that I'll fight at 145 or 135, either or without a problem. I did actually call for the 145 strap after I won the 135er. But since then, my coaches, they've said they want me staying at bantamweight. And, I've sorted my weight cuts out now. So bantamweight really isn't a problem for me to make. So I know that my coaches, they don't want me moving up a weight. They say there's no need, you're the champ at 135. You stay there. Why do you need to go up? For me, as I always say, I don't care. I want the big fights and I want whatever's going to get me paid the most money. So, if that was against Paddy, so be it. But either one, I see an easy fight for me.
I love it. Nathaniel, congratulations on all your success. It's been really fun watching you as of late, and that fight from September One of the best rounds of the year. Like I said, one of the best rounds that I've ever seen for a title fight, first round of a title fight, just phenomenal stuff. And then the knockout on Saturday. There were a lot of big performances. I thought none bigger than yours this past weekend. So congratulations on the win on Saturday, on all your success. And I do hope that the UFC comes calling very soon, because I do believe as well that you deserve to be there.
Thank you very much. It means a lot. And thanks for having me on the show. That's one off the bucket list.
Awesome. Pleasure is ours. We'll talk to you very soon. And again, congrats. Enjoy the victory.
Thank you very much.